Having been bombarded with isms and odges, you may ask yourself, how does it all matter to my own research? It matters in a very substantive way by affecting what it is that you're trying to produce, i.e., what theoretical contribution you are trying to make, how this theoretical contribution relates to what has gone before, for example, how you evaluate and judge existing research, and how you are going to produce your contribution, that is, what methods and techniques are you going to use to achieve your contribution to knowledge. The notion of knowledge tree explains the relationships between theory, knowledge and your contribution, and the idea here is that we look at any theory or any research from the lens of philosophy, that is ontology and epistemology, which dictate the methods that you follow, which then dictate the research outcomes, and these outcomes are of two types. Firstly, what counts as data and research evidence, and what type of data do you need to produce for it to be considered research data. Secondly, what counts as a contribution, that is, how this data needs to look like and what criteria does it have to meet in order to be considered a basis of a theoretical contribution. To give you two contrasting examples, if you follow grounded theory approach, which is situated in a constructivist/subjectivist end of philosophical spectrum, then a few interviews with individuals provide sufficient basis for theory development. Such data would be dismissed as invalid by positivists. A few interviews would be considered insufficient or bad science. If you find yourself at the positivist end of the philosophical spectrum, then you need a large sample of quantitative data to make knowledge claims and to say you've made a contribution. The knowledge tree has also consequences for your methodological choices, and some combinations of methods of data collection, analysis and quality assessment are simply not permissible. That is, the knowledge tree suggests that we are approaching the choices of methods not from a mix and match scenario, but there has to be consistency between philosophical assumptions, the type of data you collect, their analysis and assessment. Positivistic methods follow positivistic designs and techniques, and subjectivist approaches follow subjectivist methods of data assessment and collection. By non-permissible, I mean mixing and matching certain methods leads to invalid results that undermine the contribution of your study. For example, if you start a case study from an interpretative or phenomenological stand, aiming to provide new insights, but then draw on Eisenhard approach to a case study to analyze your data, the findings and the analysis will be undermined because you have used two different approaches to data collection and data analysis. The reader of your thesis will question whether you understand the assumptions behind your methods and whether you are clear about your own research philosophy. The other consequence of knowledge tree is that different philosophical assumptions drive different methodologies, which then dictate the order and timing of generic research tasks. For example, if you take an original notion of grounded theory approach, then you shouldn't spend any of your time searching for literature, because grounded theory in its very original format assumes that you approach an empirical setting with a totally blank and open mind. By contrast, if you choose a survey design to test research hypothesis in positivistic fashion, then the search for literature and the development of research methodology will take you a long time. One of the consequences of those differences is that two students following those different approaches at the end of the year 2 of their PhD study will find themselves at quite different stages of data collection. One, grounded theorist, probably well into collecting data, the other, survey methodologist, probably without any data at all yet, getting ready for the survey. Another major implication of the philosophical perspective is that what makes a good theory and what makes a good contribution varies depending on the philosophical assumptions and the research paradigm. I have provided you with a few definitions of what theory is, but there is a much broader and vibrant debate in management research on this topic of what makes a good theory and how you spot it. And I have specifically included a range of articles on both sides of this debate in a section called More on Theorizing. How does it relate to theorizing? The question of what knowledge is and how you spot knowledge, how you go about developing knowledge, links to what theories we are looking for, which in turn link to how you publish them. And the articles that I've provided contain methodological guidelines for authors, but underneath those there are hidden assumptions about philosophy and epistemology and assumptions of what makes good theory. It is important that you engage in this debate and that you recognize that a question of what makes a good theory directly follows from the question what knowledge is, which in turn follows from the assumptions about the nature of reality and the nature of knowledge. For the purposes of your own dissertation, the answer to these questions will very much be reflected in the type of contribution you make, the data you collect, and the quality criteria that you put forth to defend your dissertation. The type of knowledge, the type of data, and the type of quality assessment all undermine your claim that the contribution has indeed occurred. The type of contribution you will make will necessarily sit within a framework of assumptions about the theory, knowledge, and reality. Let me finish this session with a few remarks on the practicalities of choices. The question whether you can really make a choice, it's an interesting one, and I would side with the view that choices are really much more narrower than the preceding discussion would suggest. First of all people have their own preferences, styles, values, and interests, and one may argue that the approach, methodological approach, chooses the researcher rather than vice versa. There are other aspects of choice that are restricted. For example, you do not control who your supervisors are and what are their preferences. You do also not control the disciplinary traditions that you find yourself in that dictate the subjects and topics that you may pursue and the correct ways of pursuing them. There are also multiple practical constraints, such as access to data, time constraint, or other resources that you may or may not be able to draw on. Necessarily, you will have to make compromises. I would also say that much of what you do about the choices is a part of your PhD journey, and as you negotiate constraints, preferences, and choices you developed as a researcher, you also create a lot of waste, material that is not going to feature in your final dissertation. This is not a problem. Waste is a part of the journey. And with this optimistic thought, I'll finish this video, and in the next one we'll have a closer look at research designs. See you then. Bye.